All right, today we're diving into one of history's greatest rivalries, a showdown that literally electrified the world. This is the story of a technological war between two absolute titans, and the outcome, well, it's the reason the light switch in your room even works.
So let's start with a number, and it's a pretty intense one, 6,600 volts.
Yeah, that's the amount of electricity that was sent through an elephant named Topsy back in 1903. It's a horrifying story. But this public spectacle was so much more than just an execution. It was the brutal, shocking climax of a public relations war between two of the greatest minds in history, Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. This was a war for the future.
But to really get a handle on this war, you first have to understand the guys fighting it. And trust me, their visions for the future and how to get there could not have been more different.
So in one corner, you've got Nikola Tesla. He's this brilliant immigrant engineer with a truly radical idea for something called alternating current, or AC. The genius of AC is that the current can change directions, meaning you could send power over incredible distances. And in the other corner, you have the legend himself, Thomas Edison, the wizard of Menlo Park. His whole empire was built on direct current, or DC. It's steady, it's safe, but it can't travel very far. Their methods were just as different as their goals.
Tesla was something else. His mind was his laboratory. He claimed he could visualize and build and test these incredibly complex inventions entirely in his imagination. He could see every wire, every gear, as if it were right in front of him. That incredible mental power, that's really the source of his genius.
Edison, on the other hand, was the absolute master of trial and error. His whole approach was about relentless, hands-on tinkering. I mean, he famously ran through over 1,200 failed experiments before he finally perfected his light bulb. For him, it was all about that famous 99% perspiration.
Now, what Edison had done with his DC system was amazing, don't get me wrong. He lit up parts of New York City, but his system had a huge weakness, a fatal flaw. DC power just fizzles out over short distances. That meant you needed a power station on practically every city block. It was just massively inefficient and expensive to scale up, and this was the exact problem Tesla knew his alternating current could fix.
So after a really short and, by all accounts, super frustrating time working for Edison, Tesla struck out on his own. He was completely determined to prove that AC was the future, and with that, the war of currents was officially on.
The story of why he quit is legendary. Supposedly, Edison promised him a $50,000 bonus, an absolute fortune back then, but then just laughed it off, saying it was a joke. So Tesla leaves. He struggles for a bit, even ends up digging ditches just to survive. But he finally lands the patents for his complete AC system, and that's when he catches the eye of George Westinghouse, a major industrialist who saw the huge potential in AC. Westinghouse buys his patents, and boom, you've got a powerhouse team ready to take on the Edison empire.
So, faced with a technology that was clearly superior for long-distance power, Edison's side, well, they decided to fight dirty. They launched this vicious smear campaign. They held public demonstrations where they electrocuted stray animals with AC to prove how deadly it was. They branded it the death current. They even pushed to have AC used in the first-ever electric chair, just to permanently link it with death in people's minds.
And all this propaganda, it was working. The public was starting to get really scared of AC. So Tesla and Westinghouse, they knew they needed a huge stage, something massive and undeniable, to show the whole world that AC wasn't just safe, it was the key to a much brighter future.
And that stage turned out to be the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. This was it, the bid of a lifetime. General Electric, which was Edison's old company, bid more than $500,000 to power the fair with DC. But then Westinghouse and Tesla came in with an unbelievable offer. They could light up the whole thing with AC for about half the price. They won the contract.
And what a show they put on. The fair became this incredible, dazzling city of light. It was a breathtaking spectacle that just stunned millions of visitors with the sheer power and beauty of AC. That was the turning point. Soon after, they were chosen to build the first major hydroelectric plant at Niagara Falls, and that cemented AC's victory. The war of currents was over.
So the story seems pretty clear, right? The brilliant underdog visionary takes down the ruthless corporate giant. But is that really the whole story? Because history, it's almost never that simple.
The popular story we all know paints Edison as the clear bad guy, this cruel, jealous man who tried to destroy his rival. But if we start to look a little closer at the actual historical record, that black and white picture gets a lot murkier.
Okay, so let's circle back to Topsy the elephant. This is where the timing gets really interesting. Her execution is often held up as Edison's most evil act. But just look at these dates. The Chicago World's Fair, the event that basically ended the war, was in 1893. Topsy's death was in 1903. That's a full decade later. The war had been over for years.
And once you start re-examining the evidence, that whole Edison the villain narrative begins to wobble. By 1903, Edison wasn't even in the electricity business anymore. The decision to execute Topsy was actually made by the park owners and an animal welfare society, not Edison. And that infamous $50,000 bonus? Most historians now think that story is pretty unlikely. Turns out a lot of this villain narrative got really popular thanks to a biography written decades later by a close friend of Tesla's.
So when you peel back all those layers of myth, you find a reality that's way more complex, and frankly, a lot more interesting. This isn't a simple story of good versus evil. It's a story of two very different kinds of genius.
And far from being bitter enemies to the end, there was this deep, underlying respect. When Tesla was awarded this super prestigious Edison medal, he didn't use the chance to bash his old rival. No, instead, he praised Edison's incredible perseverance and his achievements, pointing to the diligence that they both shared.
And this just shows you that in the long run, they both won. Tesla gave us the entire AC power system that our modern world runs on. Edison gave us the light bulb, the phonograph, movies, and the whole concept of an industrial research lab. Their contributions are monumental, and they are all around us every single day.
Ultimately, their fierce competition just pushed technology forward at an incredible speed, and that benefited all of us. Tesla's brilliance didn't need a villain to exist, and Edison's legacy is so much bigger than just losing the war of currents.
So that leaves us with a final thought. The dramatic story of Tesla versus Edison is, it's really compelling. But maybe, just maybe, it tells us more about our own love for a simple story, for clear heroes and clear villains, than it does about the complex, brilliant and flawed human beings who actually went out and electrified the world.